Welcome to Noir Street, a channel where every story carries a mystery or something even darker. Our community may be small, so please subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like and tell us in the comments which part of the world you're watching from. Now let's begin the story. Chapter 1. The December function laughter pinged off the chandeliers like loose change in a tin cup. The house was dressed up in evergreen and good intentions, the kind that wilt by midnight. Nero Wolfe sat like a judge behind a plate that looked expensive enough to have its own lawyer. I worked the room, collecting smiles, grudges, and fingerprints. Nobody knew they'd left. Then a scream split the music clean down the middle. It came from the rear of the house, sharp enough to shave glass, and it had the immediate effect of turning 100 polished conversations into one ugly silence. I was nearest the corridor and got there first, which was either luck or habit. Wolfe, I knew without looking, would remain seated until movement proved unavoidable. The small library had been drafted as a staging area, extra silver on a side table, folded napkins, a tray of untouched canapés that had started to look as lonely as a bachelor at a family picnic. On the rug, Harold Brine lay on his back with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling as if the plaster had finally confessed something worth hearing. A short knife stood upright from his chest. It was planted with confidence, not a tremble, not a slip, just a clean decision driven home. A woman in green silk was flattened against the wall, hands to her mouth, still trying to scream in smaller installments. Her eyes were bright, with the kind of terror that is equal parts fear and self-concern. "Stop that," I told her. "You've done it. It worked. We all came." She swallowed and nodded, lowering her hands inch by reluctant inch. Behind me, feet arrived in clumps. Someone murmured a prayer. Someone else said briskly, "Call the police." "No," I said, "because when a body turns up in Nero Wolfe's house, you don't rush anything except the facts. We will in a minute." Wolfe filled the doorway at last, broad as a bookcase and twice as immovable. He took in the scene with one long, comprehensive look and frowned, not at the corpse, but at my Persian rug. "That," he said, "is intolerable." "Put it on the invoice," I said. "Victim is Harold Brine. The name's on every donation plaque between here and the river." Wolfe's eyes flicked to the knife. "I know who he is. I did not invite him. That narrows it," I said. To everyone who did. This was Wolfe's reluctant December function, a charitable committee that wanted his name, a hostess who wouldn't take no, and 40 respectable people packed into our front room pretending they weren't looking for leverage. Brine hadn't been on my list. He had arrived anyway, coat open, cheeks red from cold and entitlement, and behaved as if our brownstone were an annex to his bank. The woman in green silk found her voice again, this time in words. He just fell. He was standing. I came in and he was. Like that. Fell onto a knife, I said. It happens, especially to investment bankers. Her eyes snapped to me with outrage, then back to the body. "This is your house." "It is," Wolfe said, in the tone he uses for announcing the weather to an idiot. "My name is Nero Wolfe. This is my domicile. You are." She hesitated. "Evelyn Kerr." Wolfe's brow rose a fraction. "Of Kerr and Sontag, the law firm." "I'm with them," she said quickly, as if the law firm might shield her like a parasol. A man pushed into the doorway, tall, angular, with a face that looked designed by a committee that disliked him. "Evelyn, are you hurt?" he demanded, then turned on Wolfe and me with the expression of a man about to sue the furniture. "My name is Martin Sontag," he said. "This is outrageous. We demand." Wolfe's eyes did a small, contemptuous blink. "You may demand whatever you please. The universe will not adjust." In the crush behind Sontag, I clocked the important faces: Mrs. Althea Hibbard, the hostess and committee engine; Lionel Prather, a thin arts administrator with a nervous smile; Wade Harmon, smooth as a brochure; and Juniper Vale, the committee treasurer, small and neat, watching as if she were balancing accounts. I took charge of the practical. "Nobody touches anything," I said. "Nobody goes upstairs. Theodore, close the front door. Fritz, keep anyone from coming in here. From beyond the wall, Fritz Brenner's calm voice replied. Yes, Archie, I do not like this, but yes. Wolf's gaze stayed on the knife. Archie, remove it. I stared at him. The police will handle it with the delicacy of a stevedore. If there is residue or fiber on the hilt, it will be obliterated. I fetched a clean linen napkin, folded it into a pad, and leaned over Brian. The handle was plain wood, cheap, with a small nick near the base. I pressed the napkin around it and lifted with steady pressure. The blade came out with a soft, reluctant sound. Brian's shirt darkened quickly, as if it had been waiting. The knife was short, narrow, and sharp enough to make me grateful. It hadn't been aimed at my ribs. I held it up without touching the wood, and Wolf's eyes narrowed. It is not from my kitchen, he said. No, I agreed. Fritz's knives cost more than this party. Place it on the silver tray, Wolf instructed, and cover it. I did. The napkin looked too innocent for the job. Inspector Kramer arrived 10 minutes later, with 2 detectives and a uniformed man who immediately began acting as if our hallway had been built for his convenience. Kramer's face was already red, either from cold or from the seasonal insult of being called to my address again. He pushed into the library, took one look, and swore. Every time, he growled. You couldn't wait till after the holidays. Couldn't let the city have 1 week without you finding a body in your house. It is not my parlor, Wolf said coldly. And I did not find him. Mr. Goodwin did. Kramer's eyes went to the tray. What's that? The weapon, I said. Removed to preserve possible evidence. Kramer glared. You pulled it out. At my instruction, Wolf said. Kramer's mouth opened, closed, and opened again. He settled for barking. Nobody leaves. I want names and statements. You want, Wolf cut in, to conduct your investigation with efficiency and restraint. I'll conduct it however I please. That, Wolf said, is precisely the difficulty. Before Kramer could build his little empire in my hallway, I slipped back into the library for one greedy look. A murder scene is like a crossword. The first glance gives you the easy answers. The second shows you which squares are already smudged. Brian's shoes were polished, but the left sole had a fresh crescent of pale grit, not street dirt, too light, too fine. Something like powdered plaster, the dust from a renovation. Our brownstone wasn't being renovated. I also saw a thread caught at the edge of his cuff, a thin, dark filament that didn't belong on a banker's tuxedo. I plucked it with the point of a toothpick and laid it on a saucer. Theodore Horstman appeared at my elbow, silent as a reproach. Mr. Goodwin, he said, this is disgraceful. You're telling me, did Brian say anything to you when he came in? He gave me his hat, Theodore said, with the dignity of a man reporting a crime against civilization. He also said, keep it safe, I may need it later. Did he look worried? Theodore considered. He looked pleased, like a man who has purchased something unpleasant for someone else. Kramer planted a detective at the front door and another at the foot of the stairs, then began herding our guests into the dining room as if murder were contagious. While he worked, I drifted among the clusters with my best harmless smile, the one that says I'm only interested in campfire recipes. Wade Harmon was near the mantel, smooth as a brochure. When I slid in, he gave me a look that was half sympathy and half appraisal. Your boss must be furious, he murmured. Wolf gets furious about a crooked napkin ring, I said. What was Brian doing here? Harmon shrugged delicately. He spoke of misuse, of generosity turning crooked. He hinted someone was dipping into the pot. Did he name names? No, Harmon said. He enjoyed letting people imagine their own. Juniper Vale stood by the window, hands folded, gaze steady. When I approached, she turned as if she had heard my footsteps through carpet. Miss Vale, I said. Did Brian ever see the books? A pause, small but loud. No, she said. He requested them. Mrs. Hibbard refused. Did Brian accept that? Number he said he would count anyway. By Monday, I said. She blinked once. He said Monday. She agreed, and the word sounded like a date on a warrant. When I returned to the library, The uniformed man had shifted his stance, and I nearly bit my tongue. The grit on the shoe was still there. The thread on the saucer was where I had left it. I pocketed the saucer and carried it to Wolfe's office. Wolfe accepted it as if I had brought him a rare bloom. "What is that?" "A thread," I said, "from Brian's cuff, and grit on his shoe that doesn't come from our floor." Wolfe regarded the thread. "It is dark. Fine. Possibly wool. Possibly synthetic. Possibly from someone's coat," I suggested. Wolfe's eyes lifted. "Or from an item concealed. Like the envelope Brian tried to send." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Like that." I went to the front hall and inspected the coat pile with Theodore guarding it, as if it were the crown jewels. Brian's overcoat was there, heavier than fashion required, and his hat sat on top like a black accusation. Inside the hatband my fingers found a stiff card. It was not a letter, just a business card with a phone number written on the back in pencil, and 3 words: "Bring it tonight." On the brim was the same pale grit I had seen on his shoe, ground in by a thumb. Someone had handled that hat after Brian came in, someone with dusty hands. Theodore swore no one had touched it but him. Theodore does not lie lightly. So either he was mistaken, or someone had touched it when he wasn't looking, which takes practice. I returned to the dining room as Kramer's voice rose on a question and watched faces jump at the volume. In that jump, I saw who was already expecting bad news and who was merely shocked to receive it. Mrs. Hibbard's laugh came too quickly whenever money was mentioned, and Wade Harmon's smile stayed in place even when his eyes did not. Juniper Vale kept her hands folded, but her thumb rubbed the edge of her ring as if polishing it for court. Lionel Prather looked as if he wanted to confess to crimes he hadn't committed, just to end the waiting. I filed it all away. And somewhere in the house, Wolfe was turning it into a pattern. While Kramer arranged his people, I watched our guests. Murder does interesting things to respectable faces. Some got loud, trying to talk themselves into innocence. Some went quiet, hoping silence was a shield. Juniper Vale got sharper. Kramer started with Evelyn Kerr because she had screamed. He questioned her in the dining room while I hovered near the doorway, because if you don't hover, you miss things. Her story, between sobs and indignation, was that she had stepped away to find a quiet corner, pushed open the library door, and found Brian on the rug. No one had been with her. She had touched nothing. She had screamed because a dead man is persuasive. "Why were you going to the library?" Kramer asked. "To breathe," she said, "to get away from Harold." "Why away from him?" "He was rude." "Rude how?" "He said things. About my husband. About me." Her cheeks colored. "He said he had information." "What information?" "I don't know. He wouldn't say. He just smiled. Like he knew something." Kramer's face hardened. "Everybody's got secrets, some of them get you killed." He moved to Martin Sontag next. Sontag's account was polished, outraged, and full of legal phrases. Brian, he said, had been harassing their firm, hinting at a complaint and an exposure. Tonight, Brian had demanded a private talk. Sontag had refused. Then, later, this. "Where were you when he got stabbed?" Kramer asked. "In the front room with witnesses. Name them." Sontag named Wade Harmon and Mrs. Hibbard. Mrs. Hibbard confirmed with a flourish that Mr. Sontag had been nearby discussing committee matters. Harmon confirmed too, smiling gently, as if innocence were a favor he granted. Lionel Prather was next. His story came out in nervous fragments. Brian had been a donor to Lionel's organization. Recently, Brian had threatened to withdraw funding unless Lionel handled something. Tonight, Brian had cornered him by the buffet and told him he had until Monday. "Handle what?" Kramer demanded. Lionel's eyes darted. He said the committee's books were unclear. Juniper Vale's head turned slightly at that, just a tilt of attention, but it landed like a coin on a table. "Unclear how?" Kramer snapped. "I don't know," Lionel said. "He said there were irregularities, that money went places it shouldn't." Mrs. Hibbard let out a short offended laugh. "Preposterous. Wolfe's voice came from the doorway, calm and heavy. Not necessarily. Everyone turned. Wolfe stood there in his yellow silk, looking as if murder were an interruption he intended to bill. His eyes went to Juniper Vale. "Miss Vale," he said, "you are the treasurer, yes. Are the books unclear?" "They are precise," she said evenly. Wolfe nodded once. "Then someone wishes them to appear otherwise." Kramer bristled. "Wolfe, stay out of it." "A man has been killed in my house," Wolfe replied. "You will not tell me where I may stand." By the time the first round of statements were done, the party had curdled into isolated clusters, each cluster pretending not to be a conspiracy. The brownstone felt smaller than it ever had. Wolfe returned to his office and summoned me with a finger. He sat behind his desk, hands steepled. "Well?" I asked. "Mr. Brine arrived uninvited," Wolfe said. "He spoke of information. He threatened at least 2 people. He was killed swiftly with a cheap knife brought into my home. This is not a crime of passion. It is a crime of purpose." "Meaning he planned to use the information tonight," I said. "And somebody planned to stop him." "Precisely." "What's the information?" "The books, Sontag's firm." "Something else?" Wolfe's eyes went distant. "The answer is in what has not yet been said." He stopped there because he enjoys watching me itch. From the front room came a commotion, raised voices, a chair scraping, Theodore's sharp command. I was already moving when I heard it. In the hallway, a short man in an overcoat had pushed past Theodore and was holding a flat parcel as if it were either a peace offering or a bomb. "I must see Nero Wolfe," he said. His voice was strained. "It's urgent. It's about Harold Brine." Theodore's jaw tightened. "No one enters." The man's eyes were frantic. "He sent me," he said. "If anything happened, I must deliver this to Wolfe tonight." Kramer appeared, elbowing through. "What's this?" The man held out the parcel, wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "A message for Wolfe." Kramer grabbed it. "It's for the police now." The messenger's face crumpled. He said Wolfe would understand. He said it would save him. Kramer stared at the parcel as if it might bite. Then he looked at me. "Goodwin, bring Wolfe out here." "Inspector," Wolfe said. "That envelope may indeed save something. Perhaps not Mr. Brine." Kramer held it up. "You know what's in it?" "No," Wolfe said, "but I can surmise why it exists." He extended a hand, palm up. Not asking but expecting. Kramer hesitated. The house held its breath, evergreen and all. Then Kramer's fingers tightened on the parcel. "Not a chance." Wolfe's eyes hardened. "Then you oblige me to take a more active role than I prefer." I watched Juniper Vale from the corner of my eye. Her gaze had locked on the parcel with something that looked, for the first time, like genuine fear. And that, I decided, was a better clue than the knife chapter 2. The body by the tree they found him near the Christmas tree, face down in tinsel, and spilled punch, like the season had decided to get mean. The tree stood in the front room, 6 feet of earnest evergreen dragged indoors, to convince people that goodwill could be scheduled. Someone had trimmed it with white lights and silver ornaments that reflected faces in warped fragments. Grant Harlan lay at its base, one arm crooked under him, the other extended as if he'd tried to crawl away from cheer and failed. Red punch soaked into the rug and his dinner jacket alike, giving the impression false, but vivid, that he had bled holiday spirit. He hadn't, I checked. I knelt, careful not to step on the tinsel that had stuck to his sleeve. Harlan's face was already slack, the mouth slightly open in an expression I had seen on him earlier, that evening when someone else was talking. His neck bore a livid mark, dark and ugly, like a rope burn or the kiss of a narrow cord. No knife, no gun, just hands, or something that passed for them. Behind me, the room was doing what rooms do when a second body shows up, shrinking. People backed away until they had nowhere left to go, then began bumping into furniture, each collision an accusation. Inspector Kramer arrived at my elbow with a sound like steam escaping. "You've got to be kidding me," he said. "I wouldn't dare," I said. "You're the one with the gun." Kramer crouched, took a look, and swore again. "That's Harlan, the loud one. That narrows it, I said. Everyone hated him. Wolfe came in then, moving with the speed he uses for inevitability. He stopped short of the body and looked, not at Harlan, but at the tree. His eyes followed the line of lights down to where one cord disappeared behind a table. "Do not touch anything," he said, without raising his voice. Kramer bristled. Inspector," Wolfe said, "there are now 2 dead men in my house. If you impede me, I will make it expensive." Kramer's mouth worked. He settled for waving a detective forward. "Get the medical examiner, lock it down tighter." "Already tight," I said. "We're running out of oxygen." The second death changed the flavor of the evening. The first had been shocking. The second was alarming. 2 murders don't suggest impulse. They suggest intention, repetition, or panic. Sometimes, all 3. Grant Harlan had been impossible to miss when alive. He was a big man with a voice like a megaphone and opinions that arrived uninvited. A donor, yes, but the kind who believed money entitled him to an audience and applause. Earlier I had seen him near the punch bowl, holding court and irritating everyone equally. Now he was quiet at last. I scanned the faces. That's when I saw it. The thing Wolfe would later ask me about. Surprise is a tell, but so is its absence. Most of the guests wore it badly. Wide eyes, hands to mouths, shoulders up around ears. A few wore calculation, which looks similar if you don't know the difference. But one face wore neither. Juniper Vale stood near the wall, hands folded as always. Her expression composed to the point of abstraction. She looked at the body, the way an accountant looks at a misfiled receipt. Irritation, not shock. When her eyes met mine, she didn't flinch. She nodded, almost imperceptibly, as if acknowledging a change in schedule. I filed it away. The medical examiner arrived, muttering about overtime, and bent to his work. Wolfe stood back, hands clasped behind him, gaze moving from the neck to the floor to the tree. He noted the cord then, a thin white wire that ran from the lights to the socket. It had been unplugged. Strangulation, the examiner said finally. Ligature, probably the cord. Kramer blew out a breath. So somebody wrapped him up in Christmas. Or he wrapped himself, I said, accidentally. Kramer gave me a look. You want to try that again? No, I said, just keeping the options festive. Kramer turned back to Wolfe. 2 murders. Same party. You want to tell me how that happens without one hell of a coincidence? Wolfe's voice was level. Coincidence is a refuge for the unimaginative. Meaning, Wolfe said, that these deaths are connected by more than proximity. Kramer gestured around. Everyone stays. I don't care if you miss midnight mass. There was a murmur of protest. Mrs. Hibbard tried to rally dignity and failed. Lionel Prather looked ready to faint. Wade Harmon leaned against the mantel, smooth as ever, but his eyes were sharp now. Martin Sontag whispered urgently to his wife. I drifted closer to the tree. The cord lay slack on the floor, unplugged cleanly, not yanked. Someone had taken the time. I traced it with my eyes to the outlet behind a small table. The table had been moved, just a few inches, enough to expose the socket. Scuff marks on the rug confirmed it. Someone had planned this spot. Grant Harlan had not been stabbed. He had been selected. Wolfe beckoned me with a finger. We stepped aside, just out of Kramer's immediate earshot. Archie, he said. Who discovered the body? Mrs. Hibbard, I said. She screamed again. And where was she prior? By the punch bowl, I said. Arguing with Harlan, as I recall. Yes, Wolfe said. And who else? Harmon was nearby. So was Lionel. Juniper Vale was across the room. Wolfe nodded. Yet you noticed something. Juniper? I said, no surprise. Wolfe's eyes warmed slightly. That's as close as he gets to a smile. Good now. What did Mr. Harlan know? Same as Brine, I said. Or related. He'd been talking about money, about misuse. Indeed, Wolfe said. He had a reputation for it. Kramer interrupted, voice sharp. Wolfe, I want statements again. All of them. And this time I want details. You will have them, Wolfe said. But you will also allow me to ask questions. Kramer hesitated. Two bodies had a way of leveling authority. Fine. But I'm listening. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, you are inconvenienced. That is regrettable. It is also irrelevant. Two men are dead. Both had reason to speak tonight. Both were silenced. If you are innocent, you will assist. If you are not, you will fail. That got their attention. He began with Mrs. Hibbard. She fluttered and bristled, offended at the suggestion that her carefully curated event had become a slaughterhouse. Grant Harlan was a brute, she said. He was crude and loud and impossible, but he was a donor. And tonight, Wolfe asked. He was unbearable, she snapped. He accused me, of mismanagement. He said he would make trouble. Did you threaten him? I told him to leave. Did he? No, she said. He laughed. Where did you go after that? I went to the buffet, she said. I needed a drink. Wolfe nodded and moved on. Wade Harmon's statement was polished. Harlan had been blustering. Harmon had humored him. There had been no threats. Harmon had stepped away to take a call. From whom? Asked. A client, Harmon said smoothly. Name. Harmon hesitated just long enough. Confidential. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You are mistaken. This is not a boardroom. Kramer leaned in. You can tell us now or later. Harmon sighed. My wife. Convenient, I murmured. Harmon shot me a look that would have curdled milk. Lionel Prather's nerves were shredded. He admitted Harlan had threatened to withdraw funding unless something was corrected. What? Wolfe asked. Lionel swallowed. He said the committee's finances were misaligned, that donations weren't going where donors thought. And did you know this to be true? I suspected, Lionel said. But I had no proof. Juniper Vale spoke last. Her voice was calm, precise. Grant Harlan reviewed nothing, she said. He demanded access. He was denied. He was angry. By whom? Wolfe asked. By Mrs. Hibbard, Juniper said. With my support. Did you fear him? No, she said. He was loud, not dangerous. Yet he is dead, Wolfe said, as is Mr. Bryan. Yes, Juniper said. Wolfe studied her. Where were you when Mr. Harlan was killed? Here, she said, by the wall. Alone? Yes, Wolfe nodded. Inspector, he said, may I see the cord? Kramer grunted assent. Wolfe lifted the cord delicately, examining the ends. This was unplugged, Wolfe said. Not torn free. That suggests forethought. Mr. Harlan was not attacked in a frenzy. He was lured. Lured how? Kramer demanded. Wolfe gestured to the punch bowl. Mr. Harlan enjoyed an audience. The tree is visible from most angles. It is also near an outlet. Someone engaged him here, drew him closer, and acted when the opportunity arose. 2 murders, Kramer said. You saying one person did both? I am saying, Wolfe replied, that one purpose connects them, and that purpose is. Wolfe looked around the room, silence. The words settled like dust. I went back to watching faces. Mrs. Hibbard's outrage had curdled into fear. Harmon's smoothness had tightened. Lionel looked ready to confess to everything since kindergarten. Juniper Vale remained composed, but her hands had tightened, the knuckles pale. I caught Wolfe's eye and jerked my head slightly toward her. He gave the smallest nod. Kramer rubbed his forehead. We'll take everyone downtown. That will be unnecessary, Wolfe said. Kramer stared. You don't get to decide that. I do, Wolfe said, if I can tell you who did it. The room went still. Even the tree lights seemed to pause. Kramer barked a laugh. Now, with 2 bodies and a room full of suspects. Yes, Wolfe said, but not yet. He turned to me. Archie, what did you notice? I cleared my throat. Besides the obvious. When Harlan was found, everyone reacted, except one person. Kramer's eyes sharpened. Who? Juniper Vale, I said. She wasn't surprised. Juniper's gaze flicked to me, cool and measuring. That proves nothing, Kramer said. No, Wolfe agreed. But it invites inquiry. He turned back to the room. Ladies and gentlemen, you will remain here. I will retire to consider, Mr. Goodwin will observe. Inspector, you may fume. He pivoted and headed for his office, the tree blinking behind him like a witness that wished it could forget. As he went, I heard Juniper Vale exhale for the first time since the body had been found. And that, I decided, was the second best clue of the night. Chapter 3. Locked smiles and open. Lies the host swore nobody had left the parlor since the toast. She swore it with volume, posture, and a moral fervor that suggested contradiction would be a personal insult. Mrs. Althea Hibbard stood near the dining room archway, like a marble bust commissioned by her own ego, shoulders back, chin lifted, eyes flashing with the conviction of a woman who believed good hosting was a civic duty. It would have been noticed, she said, for the third time we were all together, every single one of us after the toast. No one left the room. Inspector Kramer dragged a hand down his face. 2 murders had shaved his patience to the bone. You're telling me, he said slowly, that from the moment champagne glasses came down to the moment Mr. Harlan was found dead, nobody stepped out of the parlor, not to the hall, not to the stairs, not even for air. That is exactly what I am telling you, Mrs. Hibbard snapped. I was watching. Theodore Horstman, stationed near the front hall like a monument to discipline, inclined his head. The front door remained closed, he said. No coats were removed. I observed no departures. Wolfe regarded them from the doorway of his office, his great bulk settled in a chair that looked built for him alone. His hands rested loosely on his knees. His face was calm, but his eyes were busy. Madam, Wolfe said, you are confusing vigilance with perception. They are not synonymous. Kramer spun on him. Wolfe, this is not the time for philosophy. On the contrary, Wolfe replied. It is precisely the time. Philosophy is merely logic wearing better manners. Grant Harlan had been alive less than 10 minutes earlier, alive and offensive. His voice had filled the parlor, his laughter had bounced off the walls, and his opinions had landed where they were least welcome. Loud men leave residue. The room still felt crowded with him, even with his body hidden beneath a sheet near the Christmas tree. The second death had changed the temperature. The first had been shocking, disruptive. The second was destabilizing. One murder can be accidental in motive, if not in execution. 2 murders suggest purpose, or panic. Kramer wanted control. Wolfe wanted truth. I wanted everyone talking before they learned how to lie better. So I started shaking the bowl. I drifted first toward Wade Harmon, because smooth men fracture in interesting ways when pressure is applied sideways. Harmon stood near the mantel again, glass in hand, posture relaxed, the picture of a man accustomed to rooms opening for him. Harlan was in full voice tonight, I said lightly. Harmon's smile was practiced, not spontaneous. Grant never did anything quietly. He seemed particularly generous with accusations. Harmon's eyes narrowed a fraction. He enjoyed provocation, especially when there was money involved. That earned me a pause. Not long, just enough. He suggested, Harmon said carefully, that certain donations were not reaching their intended destinations. That's a polite way to say stolen. Harmon shrugged. I didn't say stolen. Grant liked to exaggerate. Who did he exaggerate about? Harmon's gaze flicked, involuntary, toward Mrs. Hibbard. The committee, he said. Leadership, oversight. And you. I was not mentioned, Harmon said quickly. But you listened. I always listen. I left him polishing that line and crossed to Lionel Prather, who looked like a man waiting for a trapdoor to open under his chair. He sat rigidly near the dining table, hands clenched together, knuckles white, eyes darting every time a voice rose. Lionel, I said gently, you look like someone who'd welcome a confession booth. He attempted a laugh and failed. Grant Harlan was pressing me about the money. Yes. Hard. He said donors were being misled, that some funds were being routed through outside entities. Outside meaning illegal. Lionel swallowed. Outside meaning hidden. Did he name names? No, Lionel said miserably, but he said he had proof. He said tonight was only the beginning. That would make anyone nervous. It made me sick, Lionel said. I don't steal. I barely balance my checkbook. Across the room, Martin Sontag stood with his wife, one arm around her shoulders, posture protective and proprietary. His eyes tracked every movement with professional suspicion. Mr. Sontag, I said, Harlan mentioned your firm earlier. Sontag's mouth tightened. Grant Harlan enjoyed intimidation. Did he intimidate you? He accused my firm of facilitating irregular transactions, Sontag said coldly. Without evidence. Enough to threaten exposure. He threatened many things, Sontag said. That was his nature. Nature gets people killed, I said. Sontag met my eyes. So do assumptions. Juniper Vale was last, because she had been last all evening. Last to react, last to speak, last to betray anything. She stood by the window, hands folded neatly, gaze resting on the city lights as if they were figures on a ledger. Miss Vale, I said. Everyone insists nobody left the parlor. Yes, she said calmly. I heard. You believe them. I believe, she said after a moment, that people notice absence only when they expect it. That sounds like Wolfe. Her lips curved faintly. Logic is not proprietary. Kramer clapped his hands sharply. The sound cracked through the room like a starter's pistol. All right, enough drifting. We're formal now. The murmurs died. Even the Christmas lights seemed to blink more slowly. We go step by step, Kramer said. Mrs. Hibbard, after the toast, where did you go? To the punch bowl, she said stiffly. Grant followed me. He was loud, embarrassing, and then I left him. I spoke with Mr. Sontag. Sontag nodded. She did. Harmon. I stepped aside, Harmon said. Phone call. Where? Near the stairs. Anion confirm. Mrs. Kerr nodded uncertainly. Lionel looked unsure. It was thin, but it was something. Prather. I didn't move. Vale, by the window. Alone. Yes. Kramer frowned. That's a lot of standing still. Wolfe spoke, voice even. Inspector, you persist in assuming that violence requires motion. Kramer turned. Meaning what? Meaning, Wolfe said, that if Mr. Harlan was summoned rather than pursued, the killer may not have taken a single step. Silence followed that, the thinking kind. Mr. Harlan enjoyed dominance, Wolfe continued. To lure him beneath the tree required only a promise of private confirmation, information that flattered his sense of importance. Mrs. Hibbard flushed. You're accusing me. I am observing, Wolfe said. Accusation will come later. Kramer rubbed his temples. Who had access to the tree cord? Anion, I said. It was plugged in all evening. And who thought to unplug it? Someone who planned. Wolfe said. Juniper Vale met his gaze steadily. Planning is not a crime. No, Wolfe agreed. But it is a habit. The parlor felt sealed, not by locks, but by pride. Nobody had left because nobody needed to. The killer hadn't fled. The killer had remained, smiling, listening, adjusting. I looked around at the faces, Mrs. Hibbard's brittle outrage, Harmon's polished calm, Lionel's raw fear, Sontag's legal frost, Juniper's immaculate composure, locked smiles everywhere, open lies beneath them, waiting for the right pressure. A party, I reflected, is a bowl of nuts. Shake it hard enough, and the cracked ones rise to the top. Wolfe caught my eye and inclined his head. Just once. Indeed, Archie, he said softly. And we have not yet begun to shake. Chapter 4. The guest list with teeth. A guest list is supposed to tell you who was invited. This one told you who could bite. By the time Wolfe consented to widen the circle, the house had taken on the air of a ship that had discovered it was leaking below the waterline. The original guests, committee members, donors, decorative spouses, were brittle with fatigue and fear. The second ring, The necessary people who had hovered at the edges of the party like parentheses brought a different tension. They were professionals. They had reasons to be here beyond canap phase and social obligation, and reasons are sharper than knives. Wolfe sat in his office, immovable, authoritative, the brownstone's gravitational center, restored despite 2 corpses and Inspector Kramer's increasingly creative profanity. Kramer had protested the expansion, Wolfe had ignored him. Kramer had yielded, because Wolfe was right, and Kramer knew it, which always made him angrier. They came in one at a time. Hazel Dawn entered first, because she was the kind of woman who always entered first. She had the posture of a dancer, and the smile of someone who had learned early that smiling prevented questions. It was a good smile, bright, symmetrical, efficient, but it never reached her eyes, which flicked around the room like a cat testing surfaces. "Hazel Dawn," she said briskly. "Event manager. I coordinated the evening." "You coordinated," Wolfe said, "yet 2 men died." Her smile tightened. "That was not on the schedule." "Few murders are," Wolfe said. "Sit." She perched on the edge of a chair, legs crossed, hands folded neatly in her lap. I noticed her fingers immediately. Well, manicured, yes, but restless. The right thumb rubbed the side of her index finger over and over. A tiny abrasion hidden by polish, nervous habit, or irritation. "Miss Dawn," Wolfe said, "you were responsible for logistics." "Yes." "Staff, caterers, servers, coat check, cleanup, all vetted." "Did anyone leave the parlor during the critical period?" "No," she said promptly. "I was watching flow. Nobody left." "Watching flow," Wolfe repeated. "Explain." "I manage movement," Hazel said. "Crowds, bottlenecks, sight lines. If someone had slipped away, I'd have seen it." "Unless," Wolfe said, "you were elsewhere." Her smile held. "I wasn't. I leaned against the file cabinet and watched her hands. They were folded. All right, but the knuckles were pale." "Did Grant Harlan speak with you tonight?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to me, briefly. "About what?" "He complained," she said. "About the tree placement. Said it blocked the room." "Did he complain about money?" Her smile faltered for the first time. "He complained about everything." Wolfe nodded. "You may go." She stood too quickly, then corrected herself and walked out with the smile still stapled on when the door closed. Wolfe glanced at me. "She manages people," he said, "and resents those who disrupt her control." "Not enough to strangle one with Christmas de Faco," I said. "Perhaps," Wolfe said, "but keep her on the list." Miles Kerr was next. If Hazel Dawn had been polished, Miles Kerr was buffed raw. He was a narrow man with sharp cheekbones and eyes that looked perpetually insulted by arithmetic. His suit was conservative to the point of hostility, and his tie knot was tight enough to suggest self-punishment. "My wife is very upset," he said without preamble. "That," Wolfe replied, "is not germane." Sontag stiffened. "I am the foundation treasurer." "Yes," Wolfe said. "You guard numbers the way some men guard their daughters." Kerr's lips pressed together. "I take my responsibilities seriously." "As do murderers," Wolfe said. "Sit." Kerr sat rigidly, hands flat on his knees. Unlike Hazel, his hands were still, too still. He was controlling them. "Mr. Kerr," Wolfe said, "did Mr. Harlan accuse you of mismanagement?" Kerr's jaw tightened. "He accused everyone." "Did he accuse you specifically?" "Yes," Kerr snapped. "Without justification." "Did he threaten exposure?" "He threatened embarrassment," Kerr said. "There is a difference." "Not to a man with a reputation," Wolfe said. I stepped in. "Grant Harlan wasn't subtle." "Did he mention names?" Kerr hesitated. "He implied Mrs. Hibbard lacked oversight." "Did he mention Juniper Vale?" Kerr's eyes flicked, fast, involuntary, to the door. That answer came too quickly. Wolfe noticed it too. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You are certain?" Yes. Yet you hesitate, Wolfe said. Kerr flushed. I hesitate because this is absurd. 2 men are dead, and you're interrogating accountants like criminals. Wolfe's voice cooled. Accountants are frequently criminals. They are merely tidy ones. Kerr rose, offended, and left without another word. I watched him go. Hands never moved. I said, Indeed, Wolfe replied. He was guarding something. Lily Rowan came in clutching a notebook like it was a flotation device. She was young, mid-20s at most, with eyes too large for her face and a posture that suggested she'd learned to make herself smaller around loud men. The notebook was battered, corners bent, pages thick with use. I'm Grant's assistant, she said softly. Was yes, Wolfe said. Sit, Miss Rowan. She perched nervously, notebook pressed to her chest. I noticed immediately that her hands were ink, stained, not fresh, but habitual. She lived in that notebook. Miss Rowan, Wolfe said. What did Mr. Harlan intend to do tonight? She swallowed. He said he was going to confront them. Whom? The committee, the foundation, everyone. About what? She hesitated, then opened the notebook and flipped to a page she clearly knew by heart. About money, donations. He found discrepancies. Explain, Wolfe said. He referenced donor acknowledgements with internal reports. Lily said. Some gifts were recorded twice. Others disappeared for months, then reappeared under different categories. Who had access to those records? Wolfe asked. The treasurer and others. Names, Wolfe said. Juniper Vale, Lily said quietly, and Miles Kerr. I felt the room tighten. Did Mr. Harlan fear for his safety? Wolfe asked. Lily shook her head. Number, he was excited. He said tonight would be fun. That is often a mistake, Wolfe said. Did he bring evidence? I asked. She nodded. Yes, copies. He said if anything happened to him, people would know where to look. Where? Wolfe asked. She hesitated. He didn't say. He trusted me, but not with everything. Wolfe studied her. You are withholding something. Lily's grip tightened on the notebook. I don't want to get anyone in trouble. 2 men are dead, Wolfe said. Trouble has arrived. She swallowed hard. Grant suspected Hazeldawn was altering guest records. Shifting credit, he thought she was helping someone mask the flow of donations. Wolfe leaned back. Interesting, Lily left shakily. Eyes down, notebook hugged tight. When the door closed, I exhaled. She's scared, I said. She should be, Wolfe replied, but she is also honest. Owen Prentice arrived last. He didn't bother pretending he belonged. He wore a rumpled coat, notebook in one pocket, pencil behind his ear, eyes sharp with appetite. He looked around Wolfe's office the way a dog looks at a butcher shop. Nero Wolfe, he said. Didn't think you'd let me past the stoop. I rarely do, Wolfe said. Sit anyway. Prentice sat leaning forward eagerly. This is big, 2 bodies, high society, Christmas angle. My editor's going to. Mr. Prentice, Wolfe said. If you speak of publication again, I will have you removed. Prentice grinned. Worth a try. What were you doing here? Wolfe asked. Covering the gala, Prentice said. Soft piece, philanthropy with a halo. And Grant Harlan cornered me, Prentice said. Said he was about to blow the lid off a cozy little arrangement. What arrangement? Wolfe asked. He didn't say, Prentice said, but he hinted at shell charities. Money moving sideways. Did he name names? No, Prentice said. But he said I'd get the story if I stayed. And did you? Wolfe asked. Prentice's grin faded. I got bodies. Did you speak to Mr. Brine? Wolfe asked. Yes, Prentice said. Briefly, he said Harlan was reckless. Said someone would stop him. Did he say who? No, Prentice said, but he said it wouldn't be the obvious choice. That landed. Wolfe dismissed him with a wave. Prentice lingered a moment, eyes bright, then left reluctantly. When the door closed, Wolfe sat in silence. I watched his face, the slight tightening around the eyes that meant connections were forming. Well, I said. We have, Wolfe said slowly, a convergence of knowledge, access, and temperament. And teeth, I said. Yes, Wolfe agreed. This guest list bites. I thought of Hazel's restless fingers, Care's frozen hands, Lily's ink-stained honesty, Prentice's hunger, and Juniper Vale, waiting calmly outside the room, hands folded, unreadable. Who's surprised enough yet? I asked. Wolfe's eyes lifted. No one, he said. That is precisely the problem. Chapter 5, the missing minute time, is supposed to move forward. That night, in Wolfe's brownstone, it hesitated, then lied outright. I rebuilt the evening the way a watchmaker rebuilds, a clock he doesn't trust, slowly, skeptically, and with the uncomfortable certainty that even when it ticks again, it will never be entirely honest. I spread my notes across Wolfe's desk. A legal pad crowded with times, arrows, names, and margins filled with question marks that looked increasingly accusatory. The house around us had grown quiet in that unnatural way only murder can create, a silence that listens back. 8 o'clock. The toast. Mrs. Althea Hibbard had clinked her glass with the self-assurance of a woman accustomed to applause. The room had obediently hushed. Crystal rose. Smiles bloomed on cue. Grant Harlan had spoken too loudly during it, as if philanthropy were a competitive sport and he intended to win. Harold Brine had smiled thinly, the proprietary smile of a man who believed leverage was the sincerest form of goodwill. Juniper Vale had raised her glass last and lowered it first, her eyes not on the speaker, but on the room itself. 8:10 carols. Summer almost certainly Hazel Dawn, had cued the music with professional precision. Recorded cheer spilled into the parlor, bright and intrusive, smoothing over conversational edges and discouraging intimate clusters. People shifted. Not leaving the parlor, no everyone would swear to that. But repositioning 3 feet here, half a turn there, creating blind spots the way polite gatherings always do, without admitting they exist. 8:15, the scream. Evelyn Kerr's voice, sharp enough to cut glass, tearing straight through Bing Crosby and good intentions alike. Harold Brine already dead in the library, the knife already planted and cooling, the party officially converted into a crime scene, and somewhere between 8:10 and 8:15 lived a minute that refused to sit still. I sat in Wolfe's office, pencil tapping against the pad, listening to the faint creak of the house settling around us. Wolfe watched from behind his desk, hands steepled, eyes half-lidded, the posture that meant his mind was already several steps ahead, waiting for the rest of us to catch up. Inspector Kramer paced a groove into the rug, stopped, started again, his irritation growing more focused by the second. "All right," Kramer said finally. "You keep dancing around it. What minute?" "The lights," I said. Kramer snorted. "Lights flicker, old house." "They do not," Wolfe said mildly. "Not in my house." That shut Kramer up. Wolfe's wiring is as carefully maintained as his orchids. Fritz sees to it with near religious devotion. When something flickers here, it has been persuaded. "They dimmed," I said. "Not out. Just enough, long enough, for everyone to notice and dismiss it, short enough to be charming." Mrs. Hibbard had called it quaint. Hazel Dawn had smiled and murmured something about ambience. Wade Harmon had joked about pre-war. Wiring Lionel Prather hadn't noticed at all. Juniper Vale had noticed. I knew because I'd been watching her hands. When the lights dipped, her fingers tightened, not in fear, but in attention, like a metronome clicking. "That minute matters," Wolfe said quietly. "Yes," I agreed, because Grant Harlan vanished inside it. Wolfe opened his eyes fully. "With Miss Rowan." "Until he wasn't," I said, at Wolfe's request. Lily Rowan sat across from me now, brought back into the office despite Kramer's protests. She looked hollowed out, the kind of exhaustion that comes from replaying the same 60 seconds until it feels like a confession. Her notebook rested on her knees, fingers gripping it so tightly, the knuckles showed white. "You were with Mr. Harlan after the toast," Wolfe said gently. "Yes," Lily said. He wanted to watch people. He said you could learn everything by listening. A rare insight, Wolfe said. He was excited. Lily continued. He kept saying how satisfying it was to see the pattern. And then, Wolfe prompted. And then the lights flickered. Lily said. Everyone laughed. And Grant said he needed to make a call. What kind of call? I asked. He didn't say, just, I'll be right back, like it was routine. Where did he go? Toward the hall, Lily said. Near the study. Did you follow him? No, she said. He told me not to. Why? Her grip tightened on the notebook. He said he didn't want witnesses. Kramer leaned forward. Witnesses to what? To confirmation, Lily said softly. He said once he confirmed it, he'd bring everyone together. Wolfe nodded slowly. Did he take anything with him? Yes, Lily said immediately. An envelope. Manila, thick. He'd been guarding it all night. That landed hard. Kramer's jaw tightened. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Did you see him again? Wolfe asked. Lily shook her head. Not alive. The hall phone sat outside the study, black and glossy, pretending importance through neglect. I'd checked it earlier. No calls placed, no calls received. The study line, Wolfe's private number, was worse. It hadn't merely gone unused. It had been wiped carefully, deliberately, as if fingerprints mattered more than alibis. Grant said he was making a call, I said, but he didn't. Unless, Wolfe said, he was prevented. Kramer stopped pacing. You're saying he was attacked during the flicker? Yes, I said. That missing minute. Then how did he end up by the tree? Kramer demanded. That's across the room. Because, Wolfe said evenly, the tree was not the scene of the attack. It was the scene of the presentation. That silenced the room. The cord, I said. Already unplugged, already waiting. Whoever did this planned it. They didn't improvise. And the lights, Kramer said slowly. Opportunity, Wolfe replied. A shared distraction, a moment where attention lifts upward and time loosens. Movement without leaving, Kramer muttered. Yes, Wolfe said. Mr. Harlan stepped away willingly. The killer did not pursue. The parlor itself provided cover. I looked down at my notes again. Hazel Dawn had been managing flow. She knew where eyes went, and when Miles Kerr watched faces, not clocks, Juniper Vale watched time. Who could access the breaker? Kramer asked. Anion, who knew where it was, I said, which narrows it. Hazel, Kramer said. She values continuity, Wolfe replied. Disruption risks her livelihood. Miles Kerr. Numbers, not infrastructure. Kramer looked at me, Vale. Wolfe waited a moment before answering. He always does when the conclusion is sharp. She understands systems, Wolfe said finally. Financial, procedural, temporal. She would understand that a controlled interruption conceals without alarming. And she never moved, I added, because she didn't need to. Kramer scowled, still circumstantial. Everything is, Wolfe said, until one detail refuses to be. I flipped another page. There's more. The study line. Kramer's head snapped up. What about it? Someone unwiped it, I said. That's careful, that's informed. And who knew about that line? Kramer asked. Few, Wolfe said, and fewer still would presume to touch it. Juniper Vale had been in Wolfe's office before. During committee meetings, she knew the house. She knew which rooms mattered. In mysteries, I said, mostly to myself, time doesn't pass, it testifies. Wolfe inclined his head. And the missing minute is ready to speak. Outside the office, the brownstone settled into a tense quiet. Somewhere, a forgotten speaker resumed a carol. Thin, brittle, absurd, like a lie insisting on cheer. Wolfe leaned back in his chair. Archie, he said, bring me Miss Vale. For now, I asked. For now. Wolfe agreed. Juniper Vale rose smoothly when I asked her. No surprise, no resistance. Her composure was immaculate, hands folded, posture precise, as she walked toward the office. Something caught my eye. Her watch, slim leather strap, elegant face, tasteful restraint, and a flaw. The crystal wasn't cracked. The casing wasn't damaged. It had simply stopped. At 8:11. I smiled to myself as we crossed the room. The missing minute had found its witness, and it was finally ready to talk. Chapter 6. A gift with a hook. Wolfe does not ask for things lightly. When he does, it is because the thing has already betrayed itself. "I wish to see the gift table," he said. Inspector Kramer stopped pacing and stared at Wolfe as if he had suggested leading the room in a round of carols. "The gift table," he repeated slowly. "Yes," Wolfe said, rising with the deliberate gravity of a man who regards standing as a considered investment. "The collection of seasonal objects intended to advertise benevolence, anonymity, and the convenient disappearance of responsibility." Kramer dragged a hand down his face. "You think Santa Claus killed 2 men?" "I think," Wolfe replied, adjusting his cuffs, "that murder delights in masquerade. Festivity supplies it with an entire wardrobe." Kramer muttered something that would not have improved the season and motioned for a detective to clear a path. Wolfe moved toward the front parlor with the patient certainty of a man who knew the furniture would not flee. I followed, watching the faces of the guests as we crossed the room. No one looked surprised. They looked uneasy. People don't mind being watched. They mind when attention shifts from faces to objects. Objects don't blush. They remember the gift table stood against the far wall, beneath a string of white lights that had escaped the mass, unplugging after Grant Harlan's body had been found. It glittered aggressively, metallic paper, stiff bows, curling ribbon, promising joy and delivering obligation. Mrs. Hibbard's idea. Anonymous exchange, modest limit, symbolic unity. A ritual designed to erase intention by burying it under tradition. Wolfe stopped 3 feet from the table. "That one," he said, "not the largest, not the smallest, not the most ornate. A medium-sized box, wrapped in silver paper, tied with a blue ribbon crossed with geometric precision. It sat slightly off, center as if nudged and then corrected, like a lie that had been rehearsed. I leaned in. The ribbon's been retied." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and competently." "Too competently," I added. Summonen cared. Kramer folded his arms. "People peek. It's Christmas." "They peek," Wolfe agreed. "They do not usually repair." I pulled on gloves and lifted the lid. Inside lay a carved wooden ornament shaped like an owl. It was tasteful in a way that announced deliberation. No paint, no glitter, no forced charm. The wood was dark and warm, the grain polished smooth, the wings folded tight to the body, the head tilted slightly, as if listening. The eyes were deeply set, watchful, almost severe. I lifted it carefully. "Heavy," I said. "Heavier than ornamentation requires." Wolfe murmured. At the base of the owl, just above the small pedestal, ran a hairline crack, clean, controlled, not decorative. The kind of fracture wood acquires when it absorbs force it was never meant to tolerate. "Dropped," I said, "or thrown," Wolfe said. "Or swung," I added. Kramer leaned in despite himself. "You saying that thing's a weapon?" "I am saying," Wolfe replied evenly, "that it is an object whose innocence has expired." I turned the owl over. The underside was subtly hollowed, shifting the center of gravity upward. It would fit naturally into a hand. It would strike efficiently. Someone with an understanding of leverage would appreciate it immediately. "Any blood?" Kramer asked. "No," I said, "but it's been wiped thoroughly, with care." Wolfe's attention returned to the ribbon. "Someone opened it," he said, "yoused it and restored it. Why not dump it?" Kramer demanded. "Why put it back?" "Because abandonment creates absence," Wolfe said. "Absence invites inquiry. Restoration creates normality." I looked at the rest of the table. Dozens of packages, anonymous and equal in theory, stacked like a shrine to communal goodwill. This one now glowed with implication. "Who brought it?" I asked. Mrs. Hibbard drifted closer, perfume and indignation arriving simultaneously. "They were anonymous," she said sharply. "That was the point." "Yes," Wolfe replied, "and anonymity has served its purpose. Now it has failed." Hazel Dawn appeared at Mrs. Hibbard's shoulder, smile firmly attached, posture immaculate. "I managed the table," she said quickly. "Everything was logged. Not attribution." "But you know who delivered items," Wolfe said. A pause, barely perceptible enough. "Yes," Hazel admitted. "That will suffice," Wolfe said. Hazel swallowed. "The owl was delivered early, around 6:30, before most guests arrived." "By whom?" Wolfe asked. Her eyes flicked once, involuntarily. "Juniper Vale." The air changed temperature. Kramer straightened. "Vale brought it." "Yes," Hazel said. "She said it was handmade, a personal contribution." "Handmade objects," Wolfe said calmly, "carry personal responsibility." Hazel bristled. "I didn't inspect it." "Inspection," Wolfe replied, "is often performed only after regret." I examined the crack again. The angle was precise. If you struck someone firmly, deliberately, the stress would concentrate exactly there. Enough to stun, enough to disorient, enough to make compliance easy. "Grant Harlan could have been incapacitated," I said. "Before the cord." "Yes," Wolfe said. "And incapacitation bridges planning and opportunity." Kramer frowned. "That still doesn't explain Brine." "No," Wolfe agreed. "It complicates him, which is instructive." I replaced the owl carefully, aligning it exactly as I had found it. The ribbon lay obediently across the lid, its neatness now accusatory. "Who else handled the gifts?" Kramer asked. "Staff," Hazel said. "Servers, but no one opened them." "No one except the person who needed to," Wolfe said. We returned to Wolfe's office. Juniper Vale waited outside, composed as ever, hands folded, posture precise. She rose smoothly when Wolfe addressed her, as if she had been expecting the summons. "Miss Vale," Wolfe said, "you contributed a gift tonight." "Yes," she said calmly. "The owl." "Why an owl?" Wolfe asked. "Symbolism," she replied without hesitation. "Wisdom. Vigilance. Wait," Wolfe said. "Craftsmanship." "Did you open it tonight?" Wolfe asked. "Yes. Why? I believed it had been moved. That concerned you." "Yes." "Did it crack then?" Wolfe asked. "Number. Then it cracked later," Wolfe said, under stress. Silence stretched, thin but unbroken. Wolfe leaned forward. "Miss Vale, some gifts are decorative, others are practical." "I don't understand," she said. "No," Wolfe replied evenly, "but you understand control." Her fingers tightened, just enough to notice. Kramer stepped in. "We'll have it tested." "You may," Wolfe said. "You will confirm what I already know." "And that is?" Kramer demanded. "That the owl was not intended as a weapon," Wolfe said. "It became one because it was available, plausible, and anonymous." I nodded. Like the party, Juniper Vale's composure held. But something had shifted. The owl had done its work. It had hooked. As we turned away, I glanced back at the gift table. It glittered with forced innocence, bows stiff as alibis, paper gleaming like polished excuses. Some presents aren't meant to be unwrapped. Some are meant to be plausible. And some are meant to be used once, carefully, and then put back exactly where no one thinks to look, because everyone is too busy smiling and pretending that generosity can't bite. Chapter 7. The Ledger Under the Mistletoe. If Christmas has a patron saint, it isn't generosity. Its accounting Miles Kerr's office sat 2 floors above the parlor, insulated from music, bodies, and conscience. We reached it by climbing a narrow staircase that smelled faintly of pine cleaner and old paper, the scent of diligence trying to disguise anxiety. Kerr walked ahead of us, with the stiff posture of a man escorting his own executioner, keys clutched too tightly in his hand. Inspector Kramer wanted the door forced. Wolfe wanted it opened properly. Mr. Kerr, Wolfe had said earlier, will cooperate, and now he did. The lock clicked open with a sound that felt louder than it was. Kerr hesitated a fraction of a second before stepping aside, as if he expected the room itself to accuse him. The office was exactly what I'd expected, and still depressing, spare, narrow, functional to the point of hostility, filing cabinets flush against the walls. A single desk, immaculate, with pens aligned like soldiers, no photographs, no personal effects, no clutter. Control lived here and charged rent. Above the doorframe hung the only concession to the season, a sprig of mistletoe, already drying, pinned in place with a thumbtack. It looked like an afterthought, or a warning. Festive, I said. Kerr did not smile. These are private records. They are, Wolfe agreed, settling heavily into the lone visitor's chair, which is why they will be revealing. Kerr swallowed and nodded toward the desk. The ledger is in the center drawer. Wolfe didn't touch it. He never does when he wants someone else to feel ownership of the crime. I opened the drawer and lifted the ledger out. It was heavy. Bound in dark leather, the corners worn smooth by years of careful handling. When I set it on the blotter, it landed with a soft thud that sounded like judgment. Kerr flinched. "Open it," Wolfe said. I did. The ledger was beautiful, tidy columns, immaculate handwriting, entries aligned with almost devotional precision. Dates, donors, amounts, categories, everything accounted for. If order were virtue, this book would have qualified for sainthood. It took 3 minutes to find the lie. "Grant Harlan," I said, running my finger down a column. "March, 12,000 April, 11,000 May, 8,000. Kerr stiffened. Grant was a generous donor. "Yes," I said, "and a careful one." Wolfe leaned forward slightly. "Explain." "The amounts," I said. "They're all just under reporting thresholds. Every single one." Kramer frowned. Meaning he didn't want oversight," I said. "Small amounts, often like a man stealing sugar from his own kitchen because he knows no one counts spoonfuls." Kerr's face drained of color. "That's absurd. Grant was contributing." "Yes," Wolfe said calmly. "And siphoning." We kept turning pages. The pattern was subtle but relentless. Funds routed through secondary accounts, delays that allowed interest to accumulate elsewhere, credits posted late, then corrected, nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just enough to disappear into the noise unless someone was patient and angry. Enough to look. Grant Harlan was skimming. I said finally. Kramer let out a long breath. "So one of the victims was dirty." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Which made him dangerous. And murdered," Kramer added. "Not necessarily for that," Wolfe said, "but certainly because of it." Kerr's hands were clenched at his sides. "I didn't know," he said hoarsely. "I swear. I saw irregularities, but minor ones. I assumed clerical error." "You assumed," Wolfe said, "because assumption was comfortable." Kerr's shoulders sagged. We moved on. Hazel Dawn's name appeared not as a beneficiary, but as a conduit. Vendor invoices, event expenses, floral arrangements, staffing costs, everything plausible, everything neat. Too neat. "Hazel's invoices," I said, flipping pages. "They don't match the checks." Kramer leaned in. "How?" "The vendors billed one amount," I said. "The checks paid another higher." "Padding," Kramer said. "Or kickbacks," Wolfe added. "And the difference?" Kramer asked. "Disappeared," I said. "Or rather, reappeared, under unrelated expense categories." Wolfe nodded. "Obfuscation through diffusion, a common method." Kerr shook his head slowly. "Hazel handled logistics. I didn't audit every invoice." "No," Wolfe agreed. "You trusted process. Trust, I've learned, is the most expensive habit in any business involving money." We left Kerr's office quieter than we'd entered it. Hazel Dawn's workspace was brighter, warmer, designed to put people at ease. Color, coded folders, clipboards, schedules pinned neatly to corkboards, efficiency on display like a showroom. Hazel smiled. as she unlocked the door. "I run events," she said lightly. "Not finances. You run access," Wolfe said, "which is often more valuable." Her invoices sang the same song as Kerr's ledger, boring, repetitive, soothing and false. Slightly inflated numbers repeated, often enough to vanish into charitable bookkeeping without raising alarms. Noise, when isolated, becomes music. "You billed for 3 servers at the back corridor," I said. "Yes," Hazel said. "We needed coverage." "Funny," I said. "Only 1 was paid, and no one remembers seeing 3. Her smile tightened. "Accounting error," we repeated, Wolfe said. "Errors develop habits." She stopped smiling. Lily Rowan's notebook came last. She handed it over reluctantly, like a child surrendering a diary. The pages were chaos compared to Kerr's ledger. Scribbles, arrows, names crossed out and rewritten. Human chaos, honest chaos. "Appointments that never happened," I said. "Meetings that did." "Late ones," Kramer added. "Quiet ones." Lily nodded miserably. "Grant asked me not to log them formally." "Who attended?" Wolfe asked. "Juniper Vale," Lily said. "Sometimes Hazel. Once, Miles." "And Harold Brine?" Wolfe asked. Lily hesitated. "Yes, once, last week, in the study." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Interesting." The notebook told what the ledger could not. Proximity, opportunity, silence. "Grant wasn't the only one skimming," I said slowly. "He was just the one keeping score." "Yes," Wolfe said. "And planning to collect." Kramer rubbed his jaw. "So everyone had motive." "No," Wolfe corrected. "Everyone had exposure." "There's a difference. Motive kills for gain. Exposure kills for survival." Wolfe arranged the documents on his desk without comment. Ledger, invoices, notebook. 3 testimonies in paper. He didn't accuse, he didn't explain, he composed. He slid Kerr's ledger beneath Hazel's invoices. Lily's notebook went on top, skewed slightly, the human element disrupting tidy crime. "There," Wolfe said softly. "Do you see it, Archie?" "Yes," I said. Grant skimmed. Hazel padded. Kerr ignored. Juniper supervised. "And Brine?" Kramer asked. "Harold Brine knew," Wolfe said, "and intended to profit." "And died first," Kramer said. "Yes," Wolfe agreed, "because he was unpredictable." "And Grant?" I asked. "Grant Harlan died second," Wolfe said, "because he was methodical." The mistletoe above the door shed a leaf. I stepped on it without thinking. "Next," Wolfe said. "We gather them." Kramer blinked. "All of them?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "It is time for the office." Under the mistletoe, people expect kisses. Under a ledger, they get the truth. And Wolfe, arranging facts the way a florist arranges knives, was ready to begin cutting. Chapter 8. The scream that came late. A scream, like anything else, has timing. Most people believe screams are spontaneous, that fear erupts without rehearsal, without calculation, without manners, that belief survives, because it's true often enough to be comforting. But I've learned the difference between a scream that bursts out of someone and one that arrives on schedule. The first one tears at the throat and doesn't care who's listening. The second checks the room before it opens its mouth. Hazel Dawn's scream checked the room. I was in the hallway outside Wolfe's office when it came, sharp, controlled, pitched high enough to carry through the brownstone without shredding itself on the way. It wasn't the raw, panicked sound Evelyn Kerr had made when she found Harold Brine. That scream had cracked, wobbled, and kept going even after it should have stopped. Hazel's was clean, polished. It lasted just long enough to summon witnesses, and then cut itself off neatly, like a curtain cue. I didn't run. Running tells people you believe the performance. I walked fast instead, which tells them you're interested, but not impressed. Hazel stood just inside the parlor, one hand pressed delicately to her mouth, the other braced against the back of a chair. She had placed herself perfectly, visible from the hall, framed by light, with enough empty space around her to draw a crowd without being crowded. People were already turning, already gathering, curiosity and nerves outracing logic. "What is it?" someone whispered. Hazel lowered her hand slowly, as if the scream was still echoing in her throat, and she was letting it die with dignity. I just realized." She paused, swallowed, steadied herself. "I realized what this means. 2 men dead in this house." That was all. No discovery, no new horror, just realization. I stepped closer. "You didn't just find anything," I said mildly. Her eyes snapped to me, sharp and bright. "Of course I did. I found." "You found the implication," I said. "Not the body." A flicker crossed her face. "Not fear, not grief, but irritation. Is that supposed to matter?" "It matters to me," I said. "And I'm picky." Inspector Kramer shouldered his way in behind me, already wearing the expression he reserves for civilians who complicate his evening. "All right," he barked. "What now?" Hazel screamed. I said. Kramer frowned. So it came late," I said, like applause after the curtain's already down. Hazel's shoulders squared. "Are you accusing me of staging a reaction?" "I'm accusing you of scheduling one," I said, "which takes more effort." That was enough to summon Wolfe. He emerged from his office with the inevitability of gravity, filling the doorway, eyes already inventorying the room. The angles, the distances, the faces that had arrived too quickly or too late. He didn't hurry. Wolfe never does when the truth is waiting. "Miss Dawn," Wolfe said calmly, "what precipitated your outcry?" Hazel turned to him, relief flickering briefly. Formality is a comfort to people who rehearse. "The danger," she said. "The realization that this is escalating, that we're all at risk." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "And yet your scream followed reflection." "That's ridiculous," Hazel snapped. "Fear doesn't wait its turn." "No," Wolfe agreed, "but performances do." The word landed with a dull thud. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Hazel's jaw tightened. Kramer scowled. "Wolfe, get to the point." "That screams," Wolfe said evenly, "are ordinarily reactions. Occasionally, they are signals." I let that settle and slipped back into the hallway, where people forgot to watch themselves as closely. That's where I found Owen Prentice. He stood just off to the side, notebook halfway out of his coat pocket, pencil already between his fingers, as if it lived there. His eyes were bright, not frightened, not shocked, hungry. He looked like a man who had smelled smoke before the fire alarm rang and was deciding which angle he liked best. "You're comfortable," I said. Prentice grinned. "Big night. You were in the hallway when the lights flickered," I said. "Lucky timing," he replied easily. "Old houses. You were also closest to the parlor door when the scream hit." "Coincidence." "Coincidences are cheap," I said. "This one looks custom made." He raised an eyebrow. "You accusing me of something?" "I'm accusing you of positioning," I said. "You like to be where the story breaks." "That's my job." "Your job doesn't explain why you were already facing the door," I said. People turned toward screams. "You were ready." The grin thinned. "You think I planned it?" "No," I said. "I think you were tipped." That landed harder than the scream. "Tipped by who?" he asked too quickly. "Good question," I said. "You didn't scream. Hazel did." His eyes flicked toward the parlor, then back to me. "She's an event manager. She cues reactions." "Exactly," I said. "She cues them. She doesn't improvise them." Behind us, Wolfe's voice carried, calm and unmistakable. "Inspector, kindly observe the chronology." The scream did not reveal danger. It punctuated it. Kramer swore. "You saying she staged panic to redirect attention?" "I am saying," Wolfe replied, "that she announced a narrative already prepared." Hazel's voice rose sharp now. "This is insane." "No," Wolfe said. "This is controlled." I returned to Wolfe's side. Prentice was in the hall. I said quietly, facing the parlor before the scream. Wolfe nodded once, then he anticipated it. Or was waiting for it, Kramer said. Hazel shook her head sharply. I didn't plan anything. I reacted. Late, Wolfe said. Her eyes flashed. You can't prove timing. Not with a stopwatch, Wolfe said, but with consistency. He turned slightly, drawing the room into his orbit. Ladies and gentlemen, fear is involuntary. Signaling is not. Miss Dawn's scream did not alert you to danger. It confirmed a conclusion already forming. What conclusion? Hazel demanded. That chaos had arrived, Wolfe said, and that order, your specialty, was failing. Hazel opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time that night, her posture faltered. And Mr. Prentice, Wolfe continued, was conveniently placed to observe and record. A witness with an appetite. Prentice lifted his hands. I didn't kill anyone, nor did I accuse you, Wolfe said. I accused you of waiting. I watched Hazel's hands then. Not her face. Faces lie professionally. Her hands were clenched so tightly the knuckles had gone white, nails biting into skin. Performers forget their hands. They always do. Coincidences are cheap, I said quietly. But choreography costs. Hazel's eyes met mine, and this time there was fear there. Real fear. Not of death, of exposure. Wolfe folded his hands. Inspector, he said, we are nearly prepared. For what? Kramer demanded. For the truth, Wolfe said, and it will not arrive screaming. The room fell silent. Even the Christmas lights seemed to dim in deference. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked, steady, honest, unimpressed. And Hazel Dawn, who had screamed too late, finally understood that timing is not protection. It is evidence. Chapter 9. Wolfe sets the trap. Nero Wolfe called them back into the room as if the party were resuming. There was no announcement, no raised voice, no hint of urgency. Theodore opened the doors at Wolfe's instruction, and Wolfe himself merely said, if you please. In the tone he uses when requesting salt at the table, it was enough. People came because refusal would have required more courage than any of them possessed. They filed into the front parlor stiffly, faces arranged into the remnants of social expressions that no longer worked. Smiles appeared like borrowed clothing, ill-fitting and uncomfortable, backs straightened. Chins lifted. Even fear put on its good manners. A party can survive bad food, bad music, and even bad guests. It cannot survive truth, and everyone in that room knew it. Wolfe installed himself behind his desk, the great oak slab once more assuming its proper role as barrier, stage, and instrument of judgment. I took my position to his right and began setting the scene. Yes, setting it. I carried the owl ornament first, still in its silver box with the blue ribbon, retied so neatly it might have been pressed. I placed it at the far corner of Wolfe's desk, where it caught the light just enough to remind everyone why they'd been staring at it all night. Next came the punch bowl. That earned a reaction. A low murmur rippled through the room as I set it carefully on a side table, the red liquid inside no longer cheerful, just ominous. It sloshed slightly, catching reflections of faces that didn't want to see themselves. Last, I placed a single clean glass on the desk, centered, empty, ordinary. It looked harmless enough. That's what made it dangerous. Inspector Kramer stood near the wall, arms folded, expression carved from suspicion and fatigue. Hazel Dawn stood very still, hands folded, posture perfect. Juniper Vale stood as she always did, balanced, composed, watching. Miles Kerr looked smaller than he had earlier, as if gravity had increased around him. Lily Rowan clutched her notebook like a talisman. Owen Prentice leaned forward just slightly, eyes bright, already writing the headline in his head. Wolfe waited until silence finished settling, until even the house seemed to lean inward. Ladies and gentlemen, he said softly, thank you for your patience. It is now time to conclude this unpleasant business. He did not raise his voice. He never does. People leaned in anyway, the way they do when they sense the punch is coming and know they can't dodge it. 2 men died in this house tonight, Wolfe continued. Harold Brine and Grant Harlan. Their deaths appeared different in every respect: method, location, urgency. That disparity was intentional. A few heads turned, a few shoulders tightened. Mr. Brine, Wolfe said, was stabbed in the library with a knife not belonging to this house. The act was crude, direct, and irreversible. Mr. Brine was volatile. He intended to exploit information for his own immediate profit. He could not be controlled. Therefore, he was eliminated. Kramer shifted his weight, but did not interrupt. Mr. Harlan's death, Wolfe went on, was more theatrical. A body displayed beneath a Christmas tree, strangled with an electrical cord, discovered in a room full of witnesses who all insisted no one had moved. Wolfe paused, letting the memory settle like dust. That, he said, was a performance. I stepped forward and opened the owl box, lifting the carved figure into the light. Its polished surface gleamed, the hairline crack near the base, catching the eye like a confession. This ornament, Wolfe said, was introduced early in the evening, anonymous, heavy, symbolically appropriate. It invited suspicion. Hazel's breathing grew shallow. Juniper Vale's gaze did not waver. And it succeeded, Wolfe continued. Many of you assumed it was a weapon. You were encouraged to do so. I set the owl down carefully. But Mr. Harlan, Wolfe said calmly, was not struck with this object. The room stirred, confusion breaking through control. That's impossible, Kramer snapped. What about? No concussion, Wolfe said. No blood, no fibers, no transfer. The crack you observed resulted not from violence inflicted upon Mr. Harlan, but from panic afterward. I nodded. Dropped, I said. Hard, precisely, Wolfe said. The owl was not a weapon, it was a decoy. Hazel shook her head sharply. You're guessing. No, Wolfe replied. I am correcting. He gestured toward the punch bowl. Mr. Harlan, Wolfe said, died because he was poisoned. The word landed with the weight of a dropped plate. Poisoned. Kramer barked. Yes, Wolfe said, quietly, efficiently, without drama. I lifted the clean glass and held it up, turning it slightly so the light caught its rim. During the brief dimming of the lights, Wolfe continued. Attention shifted, eyes lifted. Conversation paused. In that moment, a substance was introduced, not into the bowl indiscriminately, but into a single glass. He looked directly at Hazel Dawn. Mr. Harlan, Wolfe said, was possessive. He claimed a glass early in the evening and reused it. No refills, no substitutions, habitual behavior. Lily Rowan let out a soft gasp. He did, she said. He didn't like anyone touching it. Exactly, Wolfe said, which meant no one else drank from it. No one else was exposed. Kramer stared at the punch bowl. So the poison was slipped during the flicker. Yes, Wolfe said. A tasteless compound in that dilution, fast acting, particularly in a man of Mr. Harlan's size and health. And the cord, Kramer demanded. Applied after death, Wolfe said, to create a narrative. A low murmur swept the room. The display beneath the tree, Wolfe said, served two purposes. It created spectacle, and it suggested violence of a kind that could be blamed on an object. He nodded toward the owl. Miss Vale provided the decoy, Wolfe said evenly. Miss Dawn provided the staging. Hazel's composure cracked. You can't prove that. Wolfe's lips curved faintly. On the contrary. He turned to me, Archie. I stepped forward and produced a small vial, retrieved earlier from the kitchen, where it had been tucked behind cleaning supplies. Unremarkable, almost invisible. This, I said, is what was used, a sedative, toxin blend, common in controlled environments, rare at parties. Kramer swore under his breath. Miss Dawn, Wolfe said, as event manager, you controlled lighting, timing, and flow. You knew when attention would be elsewhere. Your scream did not signal discovery, it signaled completion. Hazel's face had gone pale beneath the polish. "And Miss Vale," Wolfe continued, turning, "as treasurer and overseer, you understood systems. You understood that poison leaves fewer marks than force, and that a planted weapon invites the wrong questions." Juniper Vale met his gaze calmly. "You're speculating." "No," Wolfe said. "I am concluding." He folded his hands. Mr. Harlan intended to expose the scheme. Mr. Bryan intended to exploit it. Both were liabilities. One was removed quietly. The other was removed decisively. And this gathering, this party, was used as camouflage. Wolfe leaned back. "The owl," he said, "was never meant to kill. It was meant to persuade." I looked around the room. No one smiled. No one pretended anymore. "Inspector," Wolfe said, "you will find residue in Mr. Harlan's glass, not in the bowl. You will find fingerprints on the owl consistent with handling, not violence. And you will find that Miss Dawn's scream coincided not with discovery, but with completion." Kramer exhaled slowly. "And the trap?" Wolfe's eyes flicked briefly to the clean glass. "The trap," Wolfe said, "is that only one person knew which glass belonged to Mr. Harlan." Silence. Hazel's mouth opened, closed. Juniper Vale did not move. Wolfe's voice was almost gentle. "Shall we proceed?" No one answered. They didn't need to. The party, at last, was truly over. Chapter 10. The killer's holiday. Hazel. Dawn folded first, not with tears. Not with shaking hands or a collapse into remorse. Hazel folded the way a losing general folds. Upright, furious, and already revising the narrative so she wouldn't have to concede defeat. When control is your native language, surrender feels like illiteracy. It began with a laugh. It wasn't loud or hysterical. It was short, sharp, and brittle, like a thread snapping under too much tension. "Well," Hazel said into the silence Wolfe had so carefully constructed. "That was clever." Every head turned. Inspector Kramer's hand drifted instinctively toward his holster, though Hazel was no longer dangerous in the physical sense. Exposure had stripped her of leverage, and people like Hazel Dawn are most volatile when the audience stops applauding. "You don't get to clap," Kramer growled. Hazel ignored him. Her attention was fixed on Wolfe. "You built a lovely piece of theater," she said. "Props, lighting, timing. I should have known you'd appreciate that." Wolfe regarded her with the mild curiosity he reserves for specimens already classified. Confession often follows admiration. Hazel's mouth curved, sharp and humorless. "I didn't kill Grant Harlan because I hated him," she said. "I killed him because he was sloppy." The room reacted as one organism, sharp intakes of breath, a rustle of clothing, the faint creak of a chair. Sloppiness is a crime that polite society understands instinctively. Miles Kerr made a strangled sound. Lily Rowan went pale, clutching her notebook as if it might anchor her. Juniper Vale lowered her gaze for the first time that evening, not in shame, but in calculation, as though estimating damage. "Grant was going to ruin everything," Hazel went on, warming to the truth now that it was loose. "Not because he was honest, because he was bored. He liked leverage. He liked watching people squirm, and he liked pretending that made him principled." Kramer snapped. "You poisoned him." "Yes," Hazel said evenly. "I poisoned him." There it was, no ornamentation, no deflection, just fact. Wolfe did not interrupt. He never robs a confession of its momentum. "But let's be precise," Hazel continued, sweeping the room with her gaze. "I didn't act alone." Miles Kerr visibly shrank. Hazel turned toward him with open contempt. Miles arranged the blackout, the flicker, a technical irregularity. A breaker adjustment justified as stress, testing the system paid for through foundation maintenance funds. Kerr's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I didn't know she would." "You knew," Hazel cut in. "You just didn't want to know." Wolfe inclined his head slightly. "Mr. Kerr supplied opportunity." "Yes," Hazel said. "Miles always did. He guarded numbers, not consequences." Kerr sagged into a chair, suddenly looking like a man who had misplaced an entire lifetime. "And the poison?" Kramer demanded. That was me, Hazel said. A bitter powder, fast, acting. I sourced it months ago. Don't look so shocked. Event managers plan for contingencies, allergies, reactions, emergencies. Murder, Kramer said flatly. Exposure, Hazel corrected. Grant was going to expose my padded invoices, the vendor inflation I arranged. Everyone benefited, everyone signed off. Until Grant decided to grow a conscience with an audience. Wolfe spoke quietly. You slipped the poison during the dimming of the lights. Yes, Hazel said, into his glass. The only one that mattered. He was possessive, predictable. Men like Grant always are. And the owl? I asked. Hazel's smile thinned. Insurance, a decoy. Something solid and symbolic to point at when people needed a simple story. I counted on everyone believing the loudest explanation in the room. The ornament, Wolfe said, was meant to accept blame. Yes, Hazel said. People understand weapons. They don't understand patience. Juniper Vale finally raised her head. You were reckless, she said quietly. Hazel turned on her. I was efficient. You panicked, Juniper said. You screamed too late. Hazel's eyes flashed, and you stood there doing nothing. Wolfe's voice cut cleanly through the exchange. Miss Vale, your silence is noted. It will be addressed independently. Juniper Vale inclined her head once. Control, when cornered, knows when to conserve energy. Kramer stepped forward. Hazel Dawn, you are under arrest for the murder of Grant Harlan. Hazel didn't resist. As cuffs closed around her wrists with a soft final click, she looked at Wolfe one last time. You know the worst part? She said. Grant didn't die because of justice. He died because too many people wanted him quiet, and I wanted it done fast. Wolfe met her gaze. Speed, he said, is frequently the killer's mistake. They led her away. Her heels struck the floor once, sharply defiant, then faded down the hall. The house seemed to release a breath it had been holding all night. Miles Kerr sat with his head in his hands. Juniper Vale stared at the floor, already arranging her future defenses. Lily Rowan stood very still, notebook dangling forgotten at her side. Inspector Kramer lingered. You'll testify, he said to Wolfe. It wasn't a request. I will state facts, Wolfe replied. You may call them testimony if you wish. Kramer grunted and followed his men out. The brownstone emptied gradually, decorations sagged. The Christmas tree blinked on and off, stubbornly committed to cheer. The party, such as it had ever been, was finished. Later, when the house had settled into a tolerable quiet, I found Wolfe in his office, restored to routine with remarkable speed. He sat behind his desk, hands folded, expression neutral. Well, I said, that's that. Yes, Wolfe agreed. An instructive evening. Grant Harlan, I said. Killed because he wanted to talk. Killed, Wolfe corrected. Because he wanted to talk at the wrong moment. And Hazel. Miss Dawn, Wolfe said, mistook control for immunity. I listened to the house hum softly around us. Somewhere upstairs, the orchids waited patiently, untouched by murder or holidays. As I left the office, I glanced once more at the front hall. The mistletoe had fallen to the floor, dry and forgotten. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft, indifferent, and clean. A killer's holiday had come and gone, and Nero Wolfe, as always, had remained precisely where he belonged, letting reason do all the traveling.